you and I work for a library, and we're given a book, and we're put in charge of deciding where this book goes in the library. And so the thought experiment goes, you and I open the book and we just read one random page. There's no cover on this book. We don't know the year, who wrote it, whatever. But we read up one page of the book, and it talks about a man who can just run off a cliff and fly. This man can just fly. And so now the question I have for you is, if you and I were to look at each other in the eyes and say, okay, would this be more likely, would we shift this towards the fictional part of the library or the history part of the library? What would you say?
Based on limited reading and a posteriori evidence, we'd have to say fiction, because we don't have any of that in background knowledge.
Agreed. So we're the same there. I would say that would lean towards fiction. Now, what if we read on and the next page it says that 500 people saw this happen?
Mm-hmm.
Would we tend to move this back towards the history section?
I wouldn't yet. There's not enough evidence.
Right. I wouldn't either. Especially because
I need to read more of the book.
Right. And so let's keep adding the things in. At what point you tell me when you would shift it towards history?
Well, if we're going to just keep doing these hypotheticals, I don't see how this is really going to do anything. I would like to, if we're going to talk about it, maybe we should just talk about what you're kind of getting at, because you mentioned a miracle, you mentioned 500. So why don't we talk about what we actually have in reality, not what we could come up with in a hypothetical?
Because hypotheticals are great tools to figure out, to learn about ourselves, to learn about if maybe these biases are coming into play, when and where and how. So let's just go with this a little longer. And if you want to stop, you can. But we both agreed that if we see a page of a man flying, we would say this is more likely fictional than history, right? We both agree that even if it said that 500 people saw it, we'd still say this is probably still more likely fiction than history. What if one person said, many people from the day that it happened, there was a belief system at that time that this man, yes, he really did. In other words, a creed was about this guy who could fly. I personally would still say it's fiction. How about you? So we got five.
So you say there's 500 witnesses that saw it, right? So
yeah, in the book, yeah.
Now this is written in a modern Western culture, correct?
We don't know.
So we don't know. At some point we have to become agnostic about it until we can actually read the whole book. Okay. Why can't I just be agnostic until we find more data about it?
Okay. At what point would you say that this is more likely fact or history?
I don't know. I'd have to read the whole book.
No, but what can you imagine that you could read that would convince you, no, this is history?
Okay, well, I'd have to read it and find out, what culture it was written in. So where it was written. I need to find out if it was written in a hostile culture. I need to find out if the people saying it, could they have been sincere in what they were saying? I need to find out if they were able to convert skeptics. I need to find out if they, off the cuff, mentioned stuff that would have been embarrassing to them. I would need to find out if it was just one author, or if we have multiple authors, at least two, saying similar things. So there's a lot of things that would need to go into this factor. And basically, I'm just sort of giving a lot of the factors with regards to the resurrection argument. Right. Because that's kind of what we're getting at.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're getting at. But even when we're reading this book, and let's say I'll just pick one of the things you said. You said that we read in the book that people who were very skeptical came to believe that it was true. Would we still, seriously, would you and I still say this is more likely history? Because couldn't that just be part of the narrative of the story?
It could be. It's possible.
Okay. Yeah, see, this is why I am not a Christian. Because for me, personally, the evidence that we have in the New Testament for the resurrection, which is the key thing we're talking about, key claim, it doesn't rise to the level that where I'm convinced. And
That's
and
fine.
for you, and for you it does. And so it's kind of, I think it's mind-boggling for Christians to hear me say that. But Doug, the evidence is extraordinary. I've had people tell me that. Why can't you see?
It's not mind-boggling for me.
It's not mind-boggling that it's not sufficient for me?
No.